All right, everybody. Juan Morales here, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about a very powerful distinction, the difference between simple and ordinary. This is very powerful and extremely useful, especially for today's entrepreneur, if you're creating something in a space where there's competition and you're trying to stand out and you're trying to acquire new customers like most of us are all the time. Now, most people confuse the two concepts and they believe that the simple stuff just means that it's something very common, very ordinary. And that leads your prospects to thinking that this solution does not really solve their problem because it's just too simple. But it's not because it's too simple, it's because what you're not creating in using both the simple and the complex language in your messaging is that everything should be very simple. If you look at Apple's language when they're marketing, it's all very simple stuff. It's all very much the kind of stuff that makes you want to buy. But then whenever they refer to their thing, that's when they add the magic recipe on there. That's when there's a secret sauce that makes it work. That's when it becomes very advanced. So in a way, what we want to create is something I call a communicational contrast. And what that means is you have a very straightforward, simple way of explaining something until it gets to your actual product or offer. Because that needs to be very powerful. That needs to be an advanced version of the solution. Now, what happens is when it's describing simple language to use, we tend to go the ordinary route. Instead of understanding that by simple language, all we're talking about is of using very easy to understand and easy to digest terms to explain what it is that you do and what it is that your solution does and why that solution is better for your audience. It's not meant to make it sound like everything else that's out there, because when people see that and they see that what you're talking about is the same stuff that other people talk about as well, they immediately discard it, especially if they've already tried that solution in the past. That's why so many times someone can come up to you and talk to you about a particular thing, and the moment that you're able to link it to something that you've done that has not worked in the past, you immediately discount it. You immediately even counter the person who's talking to say, oh yeah, I've tried that, it didn't work. Even though the new opportunity or the new thing that you're doing is completely different, they don't see it like that because the mind is always trying to remember from what it learned. Remember, those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. Well, guess what? We're constantly working from that point, which means that whatever sounds like something we've tried in the past that didn't work, we'll immediately associate it with that time, and we will believe right away that it doesn't really work for us. It's a careful balancing act that we have to do. On the one hand, we want to be simple, but on the other hand, we do not want to be ordinary. That is why the tool that we use for this, the distinction that we use for this, is the idea of a communicational contrast. When you're talking about the problem, when you're talking about the solution, when you're talking about the prospect, when you're talking about the current situation, everything should be done in layman's terms. Everything should be said in a very simple way. You don't want to prove to others that you're smart. You're smart because you understand that it is through simplicity in your communication that your message will get across. So the most important thing to understand here is that you want to be very simple and direct in what you're saying and in the words that you're using, in everything except when you're talking about your solution. When you're talking about your solution, that's when you have to ramp it up. That's when you want to use, I don't want to call it hypey language because it's not hypey, but you want to use advanced language. That's when you want to talk about all the things that it does and how it's built with engineering and design in a certain way and purposely made for a particular solution. Once you communicate these things, first of all, by communicating simply what the problem is, what the prospect is going through, what you learned from the experience, and all these other things that you're able to do throughout your communication, that all should be very simple. Something that you can point a finger to and say, oh yeah, I know that. You want to use very simple language at that point. But when it comes to your solution, that's when you want to create that contrast. Now, when it comes to the solution, turns out the solution is extremely powerful. Sure, it can be simply named. What you definitely want to do is every time you start talking about your product is an advanced solution to the problem. It's not the first solution that came around on a problem. It's an advanced solution that beats the competitors because of something inside of it that allows it to perform better or do the job better or solve the problem in a better way, faster way, more efficient way. So always keep in mind, especially when you're building something like this, to have that simple language that people understand, that communicates very easily what it is that the product does and what it is that it's supposed to do and what problem it solves and how it solves it and all these things, except when you get to talk about your solution itself. Because that's why using that communicational contrast, you will create a reaction in your prospects where everything sounds great, but they all expect that solution to be something bigger, something powerful, something advanced, because they want a better weapon to succeed at whatever it is they're trying to do. And that is when you can really use that language when you're talking about the product itself. But if you're just talking about the problem, or you're talking about what their life is going to look like after they've solved the problem, or you're talking about the reasons why they have the problem, there's no need to really use advanced technical language. You don't want to use those big words. You want to make it very, very simple. But simple is not ordinary. What makes it extraordinary is actually your solution. What makes it extraordinary is when you start describing what it is that you're selling to them and your product and your offer, because that makes a world of difference. And because you've added that contrast is going to make it seem even more. Because it was a very simple explanation of all of it. And when you came and you showed the solution, what happened was you ramped up the complexity of it. Right? This solves the problem in a way that is better, faster, cheaper, and easier than anything you've seen before. And people expect that. In many cases, they expect it to be a very advanced solution. Now, this applies to many markets. There may be other markets where it's the opposite, where the whole purpose is that you want to make it as simple as possible. It's a newbie-friendly market. You want the solution to be very, very simple. But if it's a market where there's a lot of frustration, where a lot of people have felt that they can't really get to their goal easily, they don't want what seems to be a simple solution. What they want is an advanced solution, and that advanced solution has to be very powerful, or at least appear to be very powerful to them. If I go back to the Apple analogy that I was talking about before, if you look at what they say, when they communicate all their stuff, their slogans are very simple. They use very simple language for that. But when they start talking about what's inside the newest iPhone, that's when they labeled all the components into something different. They make it sound like everything is incredible. I remember when there was a big thing, obviously when it came out, that at the beginning it didn't even have copy-paste. And then when copy-paste came around, they made it a huge thing. The point is to always understand the difference between simple and ordinary. If you explain everything in a simple way, including the solution itself, your solution is going to come in as ordinary. But if you explain everything in a simple way, but at the moment that you're describing your solution, you really ramp up the complexity, you ramp up the power of that solution, in the minds of your prospect, it's going to resonate a lot better, as though that is the object that's finally going to get them over that hump and allow them to achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve. So remember, simple on the explanations, but not ordinary, because ordinary never sells. So simple on the explanation, but make your product look extraordinary by using communicational contrast. Till next time, this is Juan Morales signing out. I'll see you on the next one.